Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Sex Work with the Butterfly Princess, Steph Marie, and Amy Taylor. Episode 5 of the series. Me and Amy were going to discuss legal and social stigmas. So, what we're going to be discussing in this episode is we're going to be exploring the legal challenges sex workers face and how social stigmas affect the mental health, safety, and access to resources. By understanding and addressing the legal and social stigmas sex workers face, society can create a more just and supportive environment, improving the mental health, safety, and legal and access to resources. And now we're going to discuss some of what the legal stigmas and challenges are. So, hi Amy, thank you again for joining me.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah. So the first stigma and challenges, criminalisation. In many parts of the world, sex work is criminalised, which we discussed in like the episode 2 of cultural attitudes. This legal structure creates many challenges for sex workers.
Yes. Social stigma is intimately tied up with legal stigma because most countries enact laws that reflect the social choices they would like people to make, which is fine. Social norms exist for a reason. Oddly, the problem in sex work is that sex work is a social norm and always has been, and yet they continue to legislate for the harm against sex workers. So for instance, criminalization, as you talked about, I've been arrested. I was arrested for going on a date with a guy that I liked when I was a broke graduate student. Yes, I hoped he was successful and wealthy and generous. Most broke young women like a successful, wealthy, generous man. That is neither a sin nor a crime. If I had been a billionaire, maybe I wouldn't have cared if he was rich and generous, but I wasn't. And I was arrested for that. I committed no crime and no sin. And yet that arrest record has prevented me from getting jobs, housing, relationships. I've lost friends. I've lost connection with other family members. That has hurt me my entire life, and it will until the day I die. And I did nothing wrong. And the whole world knows it. It was a date. Everyone dates. And I liked him. And I would have dated him had he not been a liar and a cop. So thanks, Tom Giffen. So yes, the other thing that happens a lot to sex workers is police harassment and fines, imprisonment. It adds costs so that you literally can't quit sex work because now you're broke. I often think that the state is our biggest pimp because they like us to make money and then they like to take it. And they literally profit off us, court cases, arrests, fines, keeping us second-class citizens that can't make a lot of money or demand working conditions in any other jobs. So we become the perfect minimum wage worker with no rights later, right? How great for the system. So that system, they claim the laws are designed to further social norms because they don't want young people engaging in sex work. It has failed colossally. It has never stopped anybody from making a choice out of economic need when they're broke, and it never will. And in fact, it usually keeps people stuck in it. Had I never been arrested, I suspect I would have been able to retire and get another job sooner.
And obviously, the next part of the partial criminalisation. I mean, we touched on this briefly when we talked about social attitudes to cultural attitudes, and we discussed how some parts of the work of sex work is legal in some countries, but other countries it's not, and so that must create a lot of confusion.
Indeed, you're correct. It does. It's very difficult to apply the law consistently when things are quasi-legal, like dungeons. Is that sexual contact or not? Well, it's subject to debate. The person might be getting sexually aroused, but they're not having sex by most people's definition of sex, but are they? Strip clubs. That's definitely a sexually charged environment. So we make these patchwork laws that strippers in Arizona have to cover their nipples in case they're lactating. Some strip clubs, if there's alcohol, the stripper has to keep her panties on. If it's no alcohol, she can be nude. The idea is that the alcohol makes it harder to enforce boundaries, and a drunk guy is gonna grope the stripper more than a sober guy. I get it, but this insane landscape patchwork of stuff, it provides loopholes for people who break the laws, and it's you know, the enforcement is a nightmare. I don't know whether law enforcement just enjoys that, because then they can go hunting in this messy landscape, and it's fun for them to go hunting and fishing for broke, vulnerable people to send to jail and put in court and be fodder for the system, or what? Because it's a nightmare, and it partial criminalization, it just doesn't work. It's accomplishing nothing.
And so obviously, now we're going to discuss some of the social stigmas. And one is like, it's come up a lot in this series, as it does come up a lot in everyday life. Mental health, because of the social stigmas and everything that surrounds it, that is going to have a profound impact on the sex workers' mental health and well-being, and also the physical well-being as well.
Of course, the body and mind are tied. If you have elevated cortisol levels all the time, you hoard blood sugar and get abdominal fat and don't sleep as well. And we know very well that being constantly under stress leads to poor physical outcomes, not just heart attacks, but everything else too. So yes, when you're constantly told by society that you're garbage for doing something that everyone else is also doing, and it is neither a crime nor a sin, it does lead to internalized shame. Shaking it off and ignoring it is not that easy for everybody. Life is not a level playing field, folks. We're not the same. I know it's difficult to think empathetically that someone else is different than you, but they are. And that's, you know, issues such as depression, anxiety, PTSD are all exacerbated by the social stigmas that are hurled at sex workers both on and offline. The joke of OnlyFans girls, which are tax-paying members of the economy and wouldn't have a job if people weren't hiring them online. So why are you so mad at them and not their customers? A lot of people react to that by insulating more, becoming more isolated. You have to lie to your family, friends, other profession, neighbors about your job. That reduces your social support network. It increases feelings of loneliness and stress. None of it's good. And people feel free to judge. They feel free to be proud of what they do. But frankly, I think there's a lot of jobs that are questionable of how good or bad you are. And we wrap some of them up in a lot of status, and those people get to feel good about what they do. And other members of our economy have to feel like garbage about what they do, when what they do is equally crucial and equally a part of the fabric of our society.
And obviously, you know, these safety stigmas, you know, really have a negative impact on the safety of the sex worker in several different ways.
Yes, of course they do. You're correct. So when things are stigmatized, you know, when it's not given legitimacy, you don't have legitimate people providing legitimate places to work, which would reduce the risk of violence and exploitation. Everything goes underground into this seedy underground abusive economy. You can't report violence. You can't, you're not taken seriously by authorities when you do. When I sued a pimp who was trying to hurt me, 4 judges tried to throw my case out of court because they basically said that my life didn't matter. I had a pimp trying to kill me, and judges basically said that I was a garbage person who should end up face down in a gutter because look at my choices in life. Ignoring the fact that I am also a sister and a daughter and a pilot and an MBA, and I took an oil company public with my bosses, and I've been a scientist, and none of the other stuff of what I've accomplished in life mattered, only that I've done sex work, that I should die. And luckily, I had an aggressive lawyer who didn't agree with that. And we got a good judge who saw me as a human being. But do you know how much work and maybe delusion on my part that took to keep fighting? Not everybody can stand it. And so, yeah, there are unaddressed abuses that go on because of the shame and mental health issues that are exacerbated by stigma.
And the next sort of stigma is access to resources. Stigma and legal challenges restrict access to the access of sex workers to essential resources like healthcare and legal, like you've just said, if you wanted to take someone to court like if they've tried to hurt you.
Sure. I mean, a lot of us, I mean, not just sex workers, but a lot of people lie to their gynecologist, because if you are promiscuous, your insurance rates will go up, or you might even lose your health care. We stigma in general, not of just sex workers, but of everybody, results in lying. That's what happens when you stigmatize people, is you get bad data and you get lies because people are trying to protect themselves and their access to resources. So when you don't let people tell the truth, when you don't fiat lux, as my alma mater said, you get a withholding of information. So healthcare providers get worse outcomes. They don't know how to treat. That compromises health and safety of people because you're just getting bad info when people can't be honest. If I tell the truth to my doctors, I lose my healthcare, right? I got a pap smear once, the lady exam you get every 3 years. And the nurse asked, how many sex partners do you have? At the time, I had 3 or 4 every few months, and all safe. I've never had an STD in my life. And I lied and said that I was monogamous, which was not true. And she looked at me and was like, are you sure? I don't know. I guess I look sexy, whatever. I don't care. But I wanted to ask her, like, do you know where your boyfriend or husband or girlfriend is right now? Are you sure you're in a monogamous closed loop? Because you don't know either. You think you are, and you think you're better than me because you think you have fewer partners. Yay for you if you do. Congratulations. But you don't actually know that. So you should be getting tested too. You should be taking precautions too. Everyone should, because you don't know. And judge not, yes, lest ye be judged, as the old good book says, right?
Mm.
We lose housing. I had an enemy who hated me and posted my address on the internet and said that I was running a prostitution ring from my home, which is insane. I was not. I've never done anything like that, nor would I. When I'm home, I'm with my dog and usually alone or with 1 or 2 neighbors or friends having a glass of wine. And luckily the building didn't care, law enforcement didn't care, because it was obviously not true. But this was a person who wanted me to lose my housing simply because this person hated me. And they used criminalization and stigma to try to render me homeless because they could. It didn't work, thank God, but in other cases it might. That's what people do to us.
And how can a society sort of address these stigmas and legal challenges?
Well, obviously, decriminalizing our work and, regulating it some. I don't suspect we will get legal rights without regulation. I'd love full decriminalization where they just leave us alone, but I suspect the government will want control because it tends to, at least in America. But providing labor rights, it'd be great if we had a union. It'd be great if we could get 401ks and SEP IRAs. And, we are already paying taxes with no rights. I've given millions to the government over the years and I get no rights. If I'm such scum, how come half the money goes to the state and feds for 22 years now? It would be nice if we could openly talk honestly with our healthcare providers and not lose our healthcare. It'd be great if we didn't have to worry about our housing when we came home from work. And all of that starts with what you're doing, raising awareness, educating the public that we're human beings, advocating. If we challenge stereotypes, then maybe the legal environment can get better after that. But culture tends to change first, and then the public pushes for different laws. Usually it's first culture.
It's very interesting, and I'm really glad that we've collaborated on this series. I think it'll be a real eye opener for people.
I hope so. There's a lot of hate against us, and there may be a rightward turn to conservatism, which will make it even more difficult for us. It will also make it more profitable for those coming after me, because every time it's more difficult, there's fewer people in it. And those left in it, although they suffer more, they also make more, because when men are more confined to monogamous marriages, they hire sex workers even more. So whichever way this goes, we will exist, and we will survive. But I would like a society much more like New Zealand or Belgium or Canada or Australia or Germany or England. That's what I think would be better, at least for my country and the rest of the first world, who hasn't come as far as your country has yet in their treatment of.
Yeah. So, to sort of highlight what we've been discussing in this episode, we've got three personal stories here, three people who have shared their personal stories highlighting impact. The first one is a lady called Diana. Now, Diana is a sex worker from the US, and she has shared her personal story about how criminalisation impacted her life. She's been arrested multiple times, and she's struggled to find suitable employment outside of sex work due to her criminal record.
Yeah. I mean, these are people that I know that maybe we'll talk to you. Hey, friends and fans, we're discussing that. Hopefully these people will talk to her. It's up to them, of course. But I hope they do. And yeah, these are people that I know. Yeah, these are just three stories. I could give you 10,000. And yeah, Diana, she has to live in constant fear of arrest. She doesn't work in as privileged of a way as I did. But she has very little access to necessary support services. And yet she is unable to quit, because every time she tries to get a mainstream job, not only is she unable to, but the two that I know she got, the bosses demanded to sleep with her once they saw that she had been a sex worker, because in their minds, she was just nothing but a whore now. So to keep the job, she was going to have to give them sexual favors. She chose not to, but then no job, right? So yeah, she's somebody that I know and care about, and I hope it gets better for her. I guess we'll see.
Now, obviously, we've talked about how Canada's more open to sex work compared to the US. So we've got a story here from a lady called Mel, and she's a sex worker in Canada, and she's been able to highlight the impact on her mental health. And she describes, and she's often described feeling isolated, unable to confide in family and friends about her professions. Mel's experience underscores the importance of creating supportive communities where sex workers can seek mental health support without fear of judgment.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that we talked about. Yeah, she's in an environment that's not criminalized outright. They're examining the Nordic model, doing some of that, which we've talked about in a previous episode. Yeah, but she's still in a stigmatized environment, and it's very hard on her. So thanks for sharing her story.
And the third story that we want to highlight is from a male's perspective. Obviously, there are male sex workers as well as females, so it's not just a purely female-dominated profession. Obviously, there are some males who work in the sex industry. This is a story from a guy called Carlos, who is a male sex worker from Spain, and he's been able to discuss the discrimination he faced in healthcare settings. Doctors often judged him or provided subpar care once they heard of his profession. Carlos's story highlights the need for healthcare providers to receive training on how to offer non-judgment or comprehensive care to sex workers. Now, that's very similar towards like, because if you look towards the AIDS or whatever, when the AIDS pandemic was about with the gay community, and people thought that, AIDS was just something that gay men got because they were very promiscuous, and they were often judged by healthcare professionals because, of their sexuality.
It is exactly the same. And meanwhile, finance bros making $5 million a year snorting cocaine every day get treated great, even though we know that cocaine use has negative outcomes for your healthcare and makes you a more risky case for any insurance company. So some of us, life is a lot of times about status. If you ever go to court, God forbid you get arrested, you will spend time in front of a judge basically showing letters from family and friends and showing your education and your job and trying to tell the world that you matter because you're a good person. And much of life is about status. When you date, you try to show to another person you're worthy. When you apply for an apartment, all of that. And so societies have decided that sex workers are the bottom level, they're garbage, and their lives just matter a little less than other people. And I think that's wrong and harmful because sex workers are also parents and friends. They typically go on to do other jobs. Not that that's the reason you should care about somebody, but they do. And they are often doing other jobs, and they are parents. And yet when people like Carlos, even in a country that's got a more liberal attitude towards sex work, Spain, they still judge him as less worthy of healthcare. They're just more dismissive, and that has negative results in outcomes. So yeah, I've tried to get therapists, and they've said things. They've thought that like every single problem I had in my entire life was related to having had been an escort, a high-end companion, where, I have other problems that are unrelated to that, but they sort of are very dismissive once they know this little nugget, because people latch onto it as if I think it's just delicious for people because, ooh, sex. And I don't know. I'll never not think that's weird and harmful. So
Well, thank you again, Amy, for collaborating me on this episode, and thank you for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the series.
thank you for talking about stigma. It's good that we talk about it.
Thank you. So